Hey guys, this is John from Bike Fit Advisor. Today we're going to go over whether to use gloves or not use gloves. I've never been terribly comfortable wearing gloves on my road bike, especially. For some reason, I've just never found pairs that consistently fit very well, and they don't really seem to minimize any problems I tend to do just as well without them. And I've found a lot of other riders have this same problem. And there's a few particular reasons why. Now, there are some reasons that you definitely want to or need to wear gloves. For riding when it's cold, just to keep them warm, of course, that's often required. You don't want to get frostbite. And for protection. And by that I mean, I do wear gloves when I mountain bike, and it's just so that if I have to put my hand down quickly or I'm passing by a rock, I at least have some semblance of protection on the outside of my hand or on the palm of my hand just from actual abrasions. But that's about the only times I wear them, and let me show you why there are so many of us that struggle with gloves.
Okay, so we want to address the poor fit of the gloves, and we want to take that a couple of different directions. First, gloves are hard. That's the first thing to realize, is they only make a certain number of sizes of gloves, and frankly, our hands are not that dissimilar from our feet in that there are a lot of different sizes out there. And I would argue that there's actually more measurements that need to be accounted for in the gloves than we need in shoes. So this is where I think that we run into trouble with gloves, is that the dimensions, oftentimes if you have a different sized hand in a couple of different dimensions, which I'll go over here in a second, the gloves aren't going to fit you very well, and that's going to create problems. But first of all, some of the first problems I see with some people, and this is a little bit more rare, but it still happens, is if we look here at this wrist strap, you can pull these really tight and Velcro them really tightly. And I have had people come in where they're having hand trouble, and they've just got that part too tight. And when we have our wrist in a certain position, especially into wrist extension, that increases that pressure even more. So that's one area, just making, having them adjusted improperly. But way more common are some of the dimensions here. Now, I want to just point a couple things out about these gloves that we're looking at here. I think these might say they're Giro gloves. I'm not trying to pick on any manufacturer. I just tried to grab some generic looking pictures here of gloves, because they're all very similar, but you'll notice that there's a pad here, there are pads here, and then across the base of the fingers there. And we'll get into the anatomy a little bit as to why these are placed here. But let me go to, and this is again where things kind of are pretty common with things are pretty consistent, I should say, because the measurements that we're really interested in are, first of all, of course we want the gloves to fit. This is the one most people think of, is this dimension from the tip of the finger to the wrist. If that's how we size our gloves most of the time, and that's important, especially on full finger gloves, obviously. But another measurement that's important is actually from the base of the finger to the wrist here, this distance. If you're, we could call this the distance of the palmar distance here. If that is, longer or shorter than what the glove is made for, then you're going to end up with trouble, especially if it's longer by a small amount. Then you're running out of room in here, and this is going to be essentially pulled tight against your hand. So, and this is of course what we run into most of all with the short-fingered gloves here, like this, with cutoff gloves. So if we have, that's the same thing. We're just measuring from the base of that finger to there. Now, if we go, let's look at why some of this stuff is in place. And then that'll kind of help explain a lot of different things for us. So this is just a very rudimentary drawing. Think of it, this is more like a cartoon. This is not necessarily anatomically correct in every aspect. It is a very general representation. But everything, the yellow pieces are nerves, the red pieces are blood vessels and arteries. So let me go through the arteries here since I didn't mark them. This artery on this side, right here on the outside of the hand, this is the left hand, we're looking at the palm. This is the ulnar artery, okay, and on this side here we have the radial artery. And they kind of come up here and they form this loop. It's called the palmar arterial arch. And then off of these we have little common digital arteries, they're called, which head towards the fingers. And you'll notice here when these digital arteries get up closer to the fingers, they split off. One goes up one side of one finger and one goes up one side of the other for each of these. And that's pretty common, and that actually happens with the nerves here too. So we have the ulnar nerve on this side, and it splits off to supply the pinky here, and it splits a little bit of a segment off here to supply the outside of this ring finger right here. And then we have the median nerve. It runs more centrally through the wrist, just by a little bit, and it splits off a lot of different ways to supply the thumb and the remainder of the palmar surface of these fingers. Incidentally, you know, I won't get into too much. There's also a radial nerve. It supplies a lot of the vessels on the back of the hand, especially in this area. On this side, you'll see it kind of supplies everything over there. Let's just leave it at that pretty much. Now here's where these measurements here, especially this palmar measurement, and then the full, especially in the case of the full finger, the full length measurement come into play. And really this measurement here from the palmar measurement often plays the biggest role. So let's look at why here. If we come up here, let's start with this. We have where these vessels split, and it's no mistake that these blood vessels and the nerves kind of follow each other's path. They often, when they run together like this, they're often referred to as a neurovascular bundle. Okay, so it's no accident that these run together, and this kind of this segment in these areas right at the base here of I should say at the top of the metacarpals are really important, because again, if this glove is tight through the palmar, in this palmar measurement from the base of the fingers to here, then what's going to happen is we obviously we wear our gloves, but they don't stay in this position as they're displayed here. They're wrapped around a bar. Okay, and again, this still applies for the standard road gloves, because that measurement is still critical for this. And so when we curl our hands around the bar, especially when that measurement is tight, and it may help a little bit if this back surface here, this material is more elastic and more flexible, but this will still happen if the gloves aren't fit properly. It will basically pull tight through there. It's gonna constrict down on this area, and it's going to be more likely to put pressure on the nerves and the blood vessels. And incidentally, you can get numbness and tingling problems from just irritation or occlusion of a blood vessel as well, because the blood vessels are what supply the nerves. But in this case, it's going to be pretty difficult to separate the pressure out. It's probably going to impact both of them. There is always a lot of focus down here at where the nerves come in at the wrist, and certainly that is a problem, but we often forget about what can happen up in this area here especially with an ill-fitting glove. So whether this measurement here, this palmar measurement, is too big or too small, it can have some effects on this area down in here around the base of the palm, at the heel of the hand, you might say. Because these pads, you'll notice these pads are fairly strategic. In most cases, what they're trying to do is either to literally pad the nerve so it's not getting as much vibration, or I've seen some gloves actually, when they're really well built and well sized, you can do this. You can actually pad around the nerve. So if the nerve is right here, where we would actually have the pad end, there, and this would be open, and there'd be another pad here, so that the nerve is actually running in sort of a void, sort of where you're supported on both sides, over here and over here, and then this is kind of left open so that it's sort of floating. Doesn't often work out that way. And again, the sizing makes this really difficult because you're trying to fit this to everybody. So invariably, what I find people have a lot of trouble with is the pads often run where the vessels and nerves are, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, for a lot of people, when the glove is ill-fitting, what it ends up happening is these pads end up actually putting extra pressure on the vessels. Again, either because they're too tight or they're too loose and they're moving around. And so you kind of can see there's a lot of pitfalls as far as glove fitting, and this is particularly the reason why when I can avoid it, I do not wear gloves, because I have trouble finding ones that fit me well.
So now it's a lot easier to see the difficulties with gloves. The true solution to all this would be just to have more sizing options. I don't know how likely that is, but that's always a possibility, I guess. Someone might come out with a lot of sizes of gloves, and that might help. And yes, we certainly can find gloves and look for gloves that have the right measurement here, so that we, at least we're, reducing the amount of strain that the glove places on our hand because of this measurement. But what happens is these, again, as I mentioned before, the gloves can be problematic when they're too small, certainly, but also when they're too big. And by the fact that there's only, maybe 3 to 4 or 5 sizes, and hands, again, have as much variability as feet do, there's going to be a lot of people that fall in between sizes. And it's just like with bike frames. When you have people fall in between sizes, there are compromises that occur in the fitting, in the sizing of things. So if you find a pair of gloves that really work for you, that's great. You should definitely keep using those, and keep, even try and get multiple pairs of them potentially, because they always seem to tend to change the sizing a little bit. But that's it for this one. Thanks for hanging in. Please put any questions, comments, anything in the below, and I will get to those. And we'll see you next time. Make sure you check out other videos here, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks, guys.